What's going on, Gator fans? In this video, we're going to be doing a reaction style commentary to a video that was done by Josh Pate at the Josh Pate's college football show, used to be known as the Late Kick Podcast. But he got a question on X or Twitter, whichever one you like to call it, and it was from somebody who asked which coach they put what, but it should have been which coach in Florida is facing the most pressure next year, and he's talking about Mario Cristobal, Mark Norvell, and Billy Napier. Now, obviously, Mario Cristobal's coming off a 10-3 season, Miami's best season since 2017 by far, with the highest rated offense in the conference, and sweeping both Florida and Florida State in the same year, and also winning a couple other games against in-state competition like USF and Florida A&M, I believe. So they went 4-0 in the Sunshine State. So for the sake of this video, we're not even going to include Mario Cristobal in the conversation because I don't think he's facing the level of pressure that you could say Napier is or Mark Norvell is. So we're not really going to focus too much on Mario in this video. We may make a little reference to him here or there, but this is Josh Pate's answer to this question about which coach in Florida is facing the most pressure next year.
Jack hit us up and said, what coach in Florida is facing the most pressure next year? They're all facing different kinds of pressure. I don't even know how to answer this in February, but I will tell you, if I had to just say, okay, let's rank the pressure on the coaches, Norvell's got the most pressure on him, followed by Napier, followed by Mario.
Okay, so he says Mark Norvell and Billy Napier. Now, I'm going to Mark Norvell and then Billy Napier and then Mario. But like I said, we're not going to focus on Mario. I disagree with him. I think the more pressure is still on Billy Napier. Granted, it's a little bit of bias because I'm a Florida fan, but I think the most pressure is still on Billy Napier. But we're going to talk about it why. I want to hear his reasoning for it first.
If I'm looking at Napier, there's so much tangible about how they ended the season last year. Like, you're thinking about Florida State, you're trying to grab air when you're trying to tell me what are they right now. Florida, there is a lot of tangible evidence that they are progressing rapidly. They're ascending as a program, we hope. DJ Lagway is one of the main reasons. Everybody stayed bought in there. Napier was as good as gone midway through last year, and then they just kept showing up to work, and now they're the better for it.
Okay, so what he's referring to is the 4-game winning streak that Florida had to end the season when they were 4-5, and Scott Strickland had dropped it as announced that Billy Napier was going to come back in 2025, and he was referencing how Florida kept battling after they started off 1-2, getting blown out by Miami and Texas A&M, to end the season. To start the season. And you guys can't see it, but on the video that they did, they have not only Billy Napier's record, but also his recruiting during his 3 years at Florida. 6-7 first year, 5-7 the next year, 8-5 this past year. On the recruiting side, he had 17th. This is per 247 Spikes recruiting system, not by ESPN or Rivals. They're going by 247 Sports here. 17th in the nation in recruiting in year 1, 13th in year 2, 13th in year 3, and then he just finished it 8th. Like his fourth class, because he got hired in 2021, then he had to fix up the class after he got hired, and then the following classes later on. So he's referencing that, and not only does Florida have DJ Lagway coming back, but they have a bunch of talent on both sides of the ball, a lot of productive players and good players that gave a lot of production to Florida last season. I'm not going to name them all because it'll take a long, but Tyreek Sapp and George Gums and Jaden Ball, Jacoby Jackson and Aiden Mizell and the starters along the offensive line, just to name a few. And he's basing that off of why I think there's still a little bit more pressure on less pressure on Napier than there is Norvell, because Napier was able to finish off the season on a good note. So you have, as he put it, some tangibles to to look for, to have optimism heading into year 4.
They still need a similar result record-wise this year. Their schedule's brutal again.
He is absolutely correct because Florida is repeating the same, like all the other SEC teams. They're repeating the same conference schedule, and they also are have their annual traditional matchup with Florida State at the end of the year, and then they're getting a rematch with Miami from last season. So 10 of their 12 opponents are still the same. When people thought Florida had the hardest schedule in the nation last season, this year Florida is repeating 10 of those same opponents.
So I think that 7 or 8 win range or better, but minimum baseline at 7 or 8 win range, they're fine. He's fine. I think Napier's fine.
I wouldn't say Napier is fine per se. I would say he's bought himself a little bit more time, but I wouldn't go as far as to say that he's fine. And 7-5 and 8-4 is not good enough for Billy Napier in heading into year 4 with all the advantages that he has heading into this season. If he were to go 7-5 or 8-4 again, it probably would let him keep his job for 2026, but I think 2026 would definitely be the ultimate make or break year for Billy Napier at Florida. So I would disagree with him there when he says, "Oh, he's fine." I don't think he's quote unquote fine yet. Now, Josh Pate, I'm fast forwarding here. Josh Pate's now going to give his take on Mike Norvell.
Now at Florida State, I've got no clue. At Florida State, logic says, how could you have job security pressure at Florida State when you just won the conference a year ago? When you just got a contract extension a year ago? And it's one season. It was just one down season.
That is not true. Now, I'm not saying Josh is lying here, but it wasn't just one. It's not just one season under Mike Norvell at Florida State. His first year, he went 3-6, and then the next year, he went 5-7 in his second season at Florida State, in which he started off the year 0-4, including a loss, Florida State's only loss to an FCS opponent in program history, to Jacksonville State. So 3-6, 5-7 with the loss to an FCS school. It's not his first bad year. That 2024 was by far his worst season, by far, but it was not his only losing record. It was just his worst by far, and it was not only a really bad Florida State team, it was the worst Florida State team of this current century. They haven't had a season where they won 2 games or less since the early 1970s, before Bobby Bowden was even hired at Florida State. So it was not one season. It was his worst season, but it was not one bad season. It's his third, and it was his worst. And there is no excuse, even if the first 2 years you were dealing with COVID and that hurt you a little bit, there's no excuse why in year 5 you had the worst season in Florida State, at the Florida State program this century, especially when you're years removed from when you got started during COVID. And not only was his record bad, but his recruiting has been terrible as well. Because if you look at his recruiting numbers since he's been at Florida State, they're much worse than Billy Napier's. 22nd, 21st, 20th, 20th again, then 12th last year, and then he fell down to 19th. So his recruiting has not been where it's needed to be at the level to keep Florida State where it was at. And that's what a lot of people, myself included, was warning Florida State fans when they were going through the 10-3 and 13-1 seasons. Yeah, you're winning right now, but you're not going to be winning in the long term if he doesn't get his recruiting together. And eventually it came back to bite him in the butt. Because once all those NFL caliber players went away in the transfer portal and in the NFL draft, you saw how his recruiting has bared absolutely zero fruit of his labor. How held back and underdeveloped that roster looked. Excuse me.
All that makes sense to me. But are we trying to apply logic to an illogical world? Because if they went 6-6, that'd be one thing. They went 2-10. Like I said earlier in the show, find me the biggest FSU hater in the world. Go back to August and have that person's worst case record scenario for Florida State. It was not 2-10. So they did worse than the worst case that the haters of Florida State would have laid out for them. So was it one season? Yes.
No, it was not just one season. It was his third losing season, in which it was his worst, which it should not have been his worst season overall, considering he's in year 5 of his time at Florida State.
Do I still think Mike Norvell's a heck of a coach? Yes, I do.
Well, if a heck of a coach is going 2-10, then Marcus Freeman at Notre Dame should practically be in the College Football Hall of Fame right now, because he just went to a national championship game. That one season is better than all three of these coaches have accomplished at their prospective schools.
Did they make a ton of moves to overhaul things and change things? They changed both coordinator positions.
And not only did they change coordinator positions, but they also changed a bunch of assistant coaching positions, wide receiver, defensive line, offensive line, and defensive back as well.
He took a salary reduction. Yes. To all of these things, yes. But when you're that bad, when it falls off the cliff that violently, I'm uneasy because I don't know what you are. I have no idea what you are, so neither does the fan base. So it may be that they hop right back up and they win 9 games this year, and all's well that ends well. But what if they lose to Bama by 17 in week 1 at home? Just like, what if that happens? Well, we're right back in the same vibe that we were to end the year. So, yeah, there's pressure to varying degrees down there in the state of Florida.
Okay, so I'm gonna play this one part that he said. That I kind of missed here, but I heard it the first time that I watched this video, which is why I wanted to do this video. But I want to replay it again.
And all's well that ends well.
All right, here.
9 games this year.
One more time.
It's the fan base. So it may be that they hop right back up and they win 9 games this year.
And that's the reason why I say Napier is still under more pressure than Mike Norvell, because if Mike Norvell goes 8-4 or even 9-3, I think his good faith at Florida State has been mostly restored, because 8-4 would still be a disappointment for Florida with all the advantages that he has. But for Florida State to go from 2-10 to 8-4 possibly, that's tremendous improvement. You can't be much worse than what you were the year before, but that's still a tremendous sign of improvement over what happened last season. So I still think because of that, Billy Napier has more pressure on him than Mike Norvell. But that's just my opinion. I mean, you guys watching this video, y'all can tell me if I'm wrong, and you can tell me why you disagree. But I just think Billy Napier still has more pressure than Mike Norvell, and that's just how I feel. And hopefully Billy Napier can rise above that pressure and give Florida a pretty good their best season under his tenure.